They asked for shelter, she offered something else. They didn't come asking for help. They didn't come begging for mercy. When the knock came that night, the woman standing outside didn't ask for shelter. She offered a deal. And the man who opened that door didn't yet know that by sunrise, his carefully guarded silence would be gone forever. The forest was quiet in the way only deep wilderness ever is. Not peaceful. Watchful. Calder Reed stood alone inside his cabin, feeding another log into the fire. The flames caught slowly, licking the wood like they were deciding whether it was worth the effort. The cabin smelled of smoke, iron, and old pine, scents that never asked questions. This place existed because Calder wanted it to. No roads marked on maps. No neighbors close enough to notice him. No reason for anyone to knock on his door. Especially not at night. The sound came anyway. 3 soft knocks. Careful. Controlled. Not the frantic pounding of someone running from danger. Not the lazy knock of someone lost. This was deliberate. Calder didn't move at first. He let the silence stretch, listening. The forest answered back with nothing but the creak of trees and the low crackle of fire behind him. The knock came again, lighter this time. He reached for the door, not the rifle. That decision surprised even him. When the door opened, the cold air slipped inside first. Then the woman. She stood straight, despite exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Her coat was worn but mended. Her boots were muddy, not torn. This was someone who planned ahead, and had still run out of time. Behind her stood 3 children. They didn't cry. They didn't hide. They simply watched him with eyes too alert for their age. The woman spoke first. "We're not here to ask for shelter." Calder's grip tightened on the doorframe. Most people opened with apologies. Or desperation. Or lies. Her voice held none of that. She continued, steady and calm. "We need a place to stay until morning. In return, I'll give you something you didn't ask for, but might need." The children stayed silent. No tugging at her coat. No whispers. Like they'd rehearsed this moment. Calder studied her face. There was fear there, yes, but it was controlled. Directed. Not fear for herself. Fear for what came next if this door closed. "You're a long way from anywhere," Calder said. "I know," she replied. "That's why we came here." That answer landed heavier than she probably intended. Calder had spent years making sure no one knew where here was. He stepped back once. Not an invitation. Just space. "Inside," he said. The children moved first. Quiet feet on wooden floors. The woman followed, closing the door behind her like she understood something important had just crossed a line. Calder watched the fire reflect in their eyes as they stood together, waiting. "Morning," he said finally. "And then you leave?" The woman nodded. "That was always the plan." But the way she said it suggested even she didn't believe it. Outside, the forest shifted. Inside, 4 strangers stood in a cabin built for one. And none of them yet realized. This night wasn't about shelter at all. The wagon moved steadily away from Redstone, its wheels carving shallow lines into the dry earth, as the town slowly dissolved into dust behind them. Halafira did not look back. She knew that if she did, the weight of everything she had left behind, the whispers, the stares, the shame, might pull her apart before she had the chance to become something new. The land opened wide around her. The prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, dry grass bending beneath the wind like waves frozen in gold. The sky felt larger here, unclaimed, as if it belonged to no one and everyone at the same time. For the first time in months, Halafira felt the space to breathe. Her hand rested instinctively over her belly, fingers spread protectively, as though anchoring herself to the one truth she still trusted. The man beside her drove in silence. He did not ask questions. He did not steal glances. He did not speak her name. His presence was steady, unassuming, like a fence built not to impress but to last. That silence unsettled her at first. She had grown used to words being used as weapons. But this silence felt different. It carried no threat. The hours passed slowly. Dust clung to her skin, to her hair, to the hem of her dress. The sun climbed higher, pressing down with unrelenting force. Her body, already strained by pregnancy, began to ache. Each jolt of the wagon sent a dull reminder through her back and hips. She shifted carefully, fighting nausea and fatigue, refusing to show weakness. She had learned long ago that weakness invited cruelty. They passed abandoned homesteads. Crooked fences half buried in sand, doors hanging loose, windows hollow like empty eyes. Places where dreams had once lived, then quietly starved. Halafaira wondered how many women like her had passed through this land, carrying loss in their bodies and hope in their silence. As the afternoon wore on, the prairie tested her. Her throat burned with thirst. Her hands trembled. Once, the world tilted just enough to make her grip the edge of the wagon tighter. Panic flickered through her chest. She thought of the life inside her, small, fragile, dependent on her strength. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to remain upright, to endure. That was when the wagon slowed. The man noticed before she spoke, pulling the reins gently. He offered water without ceremony, a simple act that felt heavier than kindness. She drank carefully, the metallic taste grounding her back into her body. He guided the wagon beneath the thin shade of a solitary tree and waited, patient as the land itself. Halafaira rested. Not sleep, just stillness. The kind that allows pain to settle instead of explode. She watched dust drift across the horizon, listened to the wind cut through tall grass. In that quiet moment, she realized something unsettling. She felt safe. Not protected by walls or rules, but by choice. His choice. When she finally gathered herself and prepared to move on, evening had begun its slow descent. The sky deepened into shades of amber and violet. Shadows stretched longer, colder. This was the hour she feared most, the hour when danger shar. The first night under that roof felt heavier than silence. Halafaira lay awake on the narrow bed, listening to the wind press against the wooden walls, counting the slow creaks of an unfamiliar house. Every sound reminded her that she was no longer running, but she was not yet safe either. Her hand rested instinctively on her stomach, feeling the faint movement beneath her palm, a quiet reminder that she was no longer alone in this world. The man who had brought her here kept his distance. He offered no questions, no expectations, only space. That alone unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. She had grown used to eyes that measured her worth, voices that judged her body, her past, her fate. This silence was different. It asked nothing from her. Morning came gently. Sunlight slipped through the small window, warming the room before she even opened her eyes. Outside, the land stretched wide and honest, untouched by gossip or whispers. For the first time in months, Halafaira felt her breath slow naturally, not forced by fear. The boy noticed her before his father did. He stood a few steps away, curious but cautious, studying her the way children study injured birds, unsure whether to approach or step back. Halafaira offered him a soft smile, not the polite kind she had learned to survive with, but a real one. He didn't speak, yet he didn't leave either. That felt like permission. Days passed quietly. She helped where she could, folding cloth, sweeping floors, preparing simple meals when her strength allowed. Pregnancy weighed on her more heavily now, the journey having taken its toll. Still, she refused to complain. Survival had taught her that gratitude was a shield. At night, memories returned uninvited. Her husband's face appeared in fragments, his laugh, his final illness, the way the town had changed the moment he was buried. She remembered how quickly sympathy had turned into hunger, how kindness had thinned into expectation. Widowhood had stripped her of protection, and pregnancy had made her a target. Here, no one touched her without consent. No one stared too long. No one asked who the child belonged to. That was when something unfamiliar took root inside her, not love, not trust, but rest. The man watched quietly from a distance, noticing small things others would miss. How she paused when standing, how she winced when she thought no one noticed, how her hand always found her belly when fear crept in. He did not offer comfort in words. He fixed broken steps, brought extra blankets, left food within reach. Days passed at the edge of that quiet ranch, and slowly, without anyone naming it, a rhythm formed around Halaphira's presence. She was not treated as a guest, nor as a burden. She was simply there. And for the first time since her husband's death, that alone felt like mercy. The man of the house kept his distance. He rose before sunrise, left with his tools and horse, and returned only when the sky softened into evening. He never asked questions that might corner her into pain. Never stared at her belly. Never spoke of the child growing inside her as if it were a problem that needed solving. That silence, steady, respectful, began to feel safer than words. The boy, however, was different. Children notice what adults pretend not to see. He watched Halaphira constantly. At first from behind doors. Then from the fence. Then closer, always curious, never cruel. He noticed how she winced when she stood too quickly. How she paused to catch her breath. One afternoon, without asking, he dragged a small wooden stool behind her so she could sit while shelling beans. That small act broke something open inside her. Halaphira had learned to expect hunger in people's kindness, an unspoken price. But the boy wanted nothing. No praise. No gratitude. He only smiled and ran off, as if helping her was the most natural thing in the world. Slowly, she began to help too. She swept the porch. Washed clothes in the basin. Cooked simple meals when the man returned tired and dust-covered. She never tried to replace anyone. Never crossed lines. But life has a way of stitching people together through ordinary needs. One evening, a rider passed too close to the house. Halaphira saw him first. The way his eyes lingered. The way his horse slowed. The way his smile carried recognition, like a man who had seen women like her before and believed they were owed to him. Fear returned, sharp and familiar. The warning signs came quietly. Eliza noticed them first, though she couldn't have explained why. A stillness in the air that felt too deliberate. Birds gone silent. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if listening. Jonas returned earlier than expected that afternoon. He didn't bring food. He brought concern. "They're not travelers," he said as he set his rifle against the wall. His voice was low, controlled, but different. Sharper. "Tracks near the lower ridge. Fresh." Eliza's stomach tightened instantly. "How many?" "At least 2. Maybe more." Nathan, who had been sharpening a stick near the door, looked up. "Are they bad men?" Jonas didn't answer right away. He crouched instead, meeting the boy at eye level. "They're men who don't belong here." That was enough. Eliza felt the past surge forward, the running, the hiding, the instinct to gather the children and disappear before nightfall. She moved automatically, pulling Ben closer, her hand resting protectively on Leia's shoulder. "We should leave," she said. "Before they find us." Jonas shook his head slowly. "Road's still half frozen. You won't make it far with kids." Silence stretched between them. Eliza searched his face for hesitation, for calculation. She found neither. Only resolve. "What do they want?" she asked. "Sometimes," Jonas replied. "Men like that don't know until they see it." The cabin suddenly felt smaller. The boy grew braver around her. At first, he had watched from corners, unsure where she fit in the strange puzzle of his small world. But children understand things adults complicate. He saw that she was gentle. That she never raised her voice. That she listened when he spoke, even when his words came out tangled and unsure. Slowly, he began to orbit her naturally, like something pulled in by gravity. One afternoon, while the wind rattled the dry grass outside, Halaphira sat near the window mending a torn shirt. The boy sat on the floor beside her, carving lines into a piece of wood with focused seriousness. Neither spoke. Yet the silence between them was not empty, it was shared. When his small knife slipped and nicked his finger, he froze, eyes wide, more startled than hurt. Before he could panic, Halafira was already there, wrapping his finger gently with cloth, her hands steady, her expression calm. In that moment, something settled deep inside him. Trust, quiet and complete. The ranch itself began to feel different. The house no longer echoed the same way at night. There was movement again, breath, small sounds that softened the walls. The man noticed it most during the evenings. He would sit on the porch after sunset, the sky turning dark blue, and hear her footsteps inside. The faint clink of dishes. The boys' soft laughter. These sounds stirred something he had kept buried for years, something he had learned to live without. But not everyone viewed Halafira's presence with kindness. Word travels fast in empty lands. A pregnant widow living under a man's roof without a ring invited speculation. Riders passing through slowed their pace. Eyes lingered too long. Once or twice, men asked questions that carried the wrong tone. Each time, the ranchman answered with few words and an unyielding stillness that ended the conversation before it could rot further. By the time the first cold winds crept down from the hills, Halafira's presence had quietly reshaped the ranch in ways no one spoke about aloud. The house no longer felt hollow at dusk. Lamps were lit earlier. Meals stretched longer. Silence still existed, but it was no longer heavy. It rested gently, like a pause instead of an absence. Halafira's pregnancy had begun to show clearly now. The curve of her belly was no longer something she could hide beneath loose fabric. Yet instead of shrinking under it, she seemed to grow steadier. Each morning she rose before the sun, not out of duty, but instinct. She watered the small patch of land she had turned into a garden, her hands patient, careful. She spoke softly to the soil, as if the land itself understood her condition, fragile, hopeful, waiting. The ranchman noticed everything, though he said nothing. He noticed how she tired more easily in the afternoons. How she paused longer before standing. How she rested a hand against her side when she thought no one was looking. Without explanation, heavier work shifted away from her. Buckets were filled before she reached them. Doors were fixed. The broken fence near the far edge of the property was repaired before she ever mentioned it. It wasn't kindness announced. It was protection done quietly. The boy changed too. At first, he had watched her carefully, as children do when they are unsure whether something good will stay. But now, he waited for her in the mornings. He brought her small things, smooth stones, feathers, bits of string he thought might matter. He asked questions about the baby without understanding what they meant. Would it cry? Would it sleep? Would it take his room? Halafira answered gently. She never replaced anything. Never promised what she could not give. She simply told him the truth, that babies arrive loud and small, that they need care, and that love is not something that runs out when shared. The forest did not return to normal right away. Even after the men disappeared, even after the fire settled into a steady burn, the night felt altered, like something had been disturbed and hadn't yet decided whether to forgive them. Jonas remained outside long after the danger passed. Eliza watched him through the window, her reflection faint against the glass. He stood motionless, listening, counting breaths between sounds, waiting for certainty that never truly came. That kind of vigilance didn't belong to a man new to trouble. It belonged to someone who had survived it too many times. When he finally came inside, the children pretended to sleep. Eliza noticed. Mothers always do. Jonas set the rifle aside carefully, as if not to remind them it existed. He poured water, drank slowly, then leaned against the wall, exhaustion finally cracking through his control. They won't be back tonight, he said. Eliza nodded. But they know we're here. Yes. The truth hung between them, heavy and unavoidable. Nathan spoke up then, his voice quiet but steady. You didn't run. Jonas looked at him. Neither did you. The boy absorbed that, something firm settling in his posture. Eliza felt a sharp ache in her chest. Childhood was not meant to carry lessons like this, but sometimes it had no choice. Later, when the children finally slept for real, Eliza wrapped herself in her shawl and sat near Jonas by the fire. You could have sent us away, she said. Before tonight. Jonas stared into the flames. Wouldn't have mattered. Trouble finds movement. And staying? She asked. That's a decision, he replied. Eliza studied him. Is that why you live out here? Jonas didn't answer immediately. The fire popped softly, a log collapsing inward. People think isolation is fear, he said finally. Sometimes it's control. She understood that more than she wanted to admit. I don't want to keep dragging them from place to place, she said quietly. I tell myself it's for their safety. But maybe it's just habit. Jonas glanced toward the children. They feel safer than they did yesterday. The words landed harder than comfort ever could. Eliza realized then what this place had become, not a refuge, not a solution, but a crossroads. Staying meant risk. Leaving meant certainty of loss. Neither option was clean. Outside, dawn began to thin the night. For the first time, Eliza did not feel chased by the future. She felt challenged by it. And that, somehow, felt like progress.